welcome to the deep dive. You sent us some really thought-provoking stuff this time, a text called Self-Mastery in Metaphysical Enrichment of the Psyche. Right off the bat, it talks about this war on the psyche, which, well, it paints a pretty dramatic picture, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Of internal battles we might not even be fully aware of.
Yeah, it jumps right in.
So we're going to dig into what this source means by internal balance, especially this core idea it presents about masculine and feminine principles within us, and explore what that means for how we, navigate our lives.
Absolutely. And one of the first things that caught my eye was how the source frames the psyche.
Yeah.
It goes back to the Greek goddess of the soul,
Right.
often shown with butterfly wings, and it mentions its Roman equivalent, anima. So we're not just talking about like fleeting thoughts, but something much deeper, our essential nature, really.
Right. And this war on consciousness idea. Okay, let's unpack this a bit. The text brings in Noam Chomsky's manufacturing consent, suggesting that media, societal structures, they can shape what we believe in, well, how we essentially govern ourselves. It's a powerful concept when we think about it.
It really is how external forces, cultural norms, political narratives, emotional conditioning, even socioeconomic pressures can mold our inner world and, by extension, our relationships.
Yeah.
What's fascinating here, though, is how this source connects these broad societal things to something really personal, our internal sense of equilibrium.
Okay.
It argues that imbalances we see out there in society and culture can directly contribute to a lack of balance within our own psyche, our soul. And it introduces this key idea of sacred masculine and sacred feminine aspects existing within our consciousness, like an inner dynamic that's crucial to understand.
This is where it gets really interesting for me. The text posits that we often experience an imbalance between these masculine and feminine principles within us, what it calls our inner dynamics.
Right.
And it takes it a step further, suggesting this isn't just, in our heads. It can actually manifest physically, even in our muscle tissue, it says. Have you encountered this kind of mind-body connection emphasized quite like that before?
Well, it aligns with holistic perspectives, definitely. The idea that psychological or energetic imbalances could have physical expressions isn't totally new.
Sure.
But the specific mention of muscle tissue is a distinctive point from this source.
Yeah. If we connect this back to those larger societal imbalances, it suggests a kind of mirroring effect,
Yeah.
Disharmony out there reflecting internally.
Exactly. And the source elaborates on how this inner imbalance plays out. It talks about more masculinity in the feminine and more femininity in masculinity. And it's important, I think, to note that this isn't necessarily about gender identity in the usual sense.
No, not really.
But more about the kinds of energies and characteristics we embody and express. And this, in turn, significantly impacts how we interact.
Yeah, the text describes these as quite polarized states. A woman in her masculinity, a man in his feminine.
And the consequence, according to the source, is a breakdown in genuine connection, difficulties in relationships, even promiscuity. It paints a picture of people not operating from internal harmony, leading to friction, instability in their bonds.
So when these internal energies are misaligned, it creates a kind of internal static, making it hard to really connect with others beyond surface stuff.
Exactly. It makes genuine connection really difficult beyond superficial needs or projections.
So what does this all mean for our inner landscape then? The text suggests this polarized state leads to confusion in our internal wisdom and even makes us believe in polarization itself. It sounds like we get stuck.
Yeah, stuck in these extremes.
And lose our ability to find balance or take responsibility.
Precisely. This belief in a polarized reality, as the source points out, it actually hinders accountability. It perpetuates constant behavioral polarization. It becomes a cycle, right? Internal conflict playing out as external conflict. Makes resolution really tough.
And then the source takes a pretty strong turn, talking about a loss of individualism leading to dehumanization and what it calls animalistic behavior, driven by lower base functions. It even draws a connection to paganistic behavior and this idea of a hive mind mentality. Excessive protectionism, constant fight or flight. That's a rather striking assertion, isn't it?
It is a strong claim, yeah. And it certainly reflects a particular perspective within the text about the dangers of, extreme conformity and suppressing individual thought.
Okay.
The connection it draws to paganistic behavior in a hive mind seems to emphasize a loss of nuanced, independent thinking and more reliance on instinctual group reactions.
The text also touches on how a lack of self-individualism can blur personal boundaries. That really resonated with me, the idea that if you don't have a solid sense of you, it's easier to get swept up.
Definitely.
And it specifically mentions this weird, messed up belief in agreeing to become a martyr for a cause at the cost of the self, linking it directly to cult-like behavior, overemphasis on what others expect.
That highlights a really crucial aspect of self-mastery, doesn't it? Maintaining that individual identity, healthy boundaries. When those are weak, individuals become much more vulnerable to manipulation, lose their own value for external ideologies or groups, exactly like the source suggests with Holtz.
Now, the source also delves into being able to discern and identify these imbalances, not just in ourselves, but in others too.
Right.
It mentions needing to differentiate between, say, autism and the nuances of narcissism,
You're right.
emphasizing the need to sharpen your psychology and your spirit to really understand people.
Which speaks to the importance of developing discernment, critical thinking, when trying to understand behavior. The source is pointing out complexities, cautioning against simplistic judgments or categories, needs deeper insight.
It then brings up love bombing
Yeah.
as a tactic in narcissistic control.
A term we hear a lot now.
Yeah. But then it moves into some more intense areas. Mentions other red flags. Complex personality disorders, obsessions, materialism, people creating personas. And then it introduces this concept of aesthetic warfare, or even a form of Satanism, linking the use of art for psychological conflict and mental warfare to communism. That's a very specific and certainly a controversial viewpoint from the text.
It's really important we acknowledge that. That connection to communism is a very specific interpretation within the source, not, universally accepted.
Right, is what this text says.
It seems the source is using it to highlight a concern about deliberate manipulation of aesthetics for ideological purposes, as it sees it. Aesthetic warfare itself suggests using outward presentation art, appearance, behavior for psychological impact, often conflictually.
Absolutely. The text gives examples: extreme body mods, excessive cosmetic surgery to drastically alter the persona, linking this to misinformation, fakeness.
Right.
It also raises a fascinating, if kind of unsettling, question about why the source believes a certain percentage of people might not have a rich inner thought life, and their tendency to create these personality overlays for agendas or protection.
This idea of a lack of a deep inner monologue in some people is certainly provocative. The source seems to suggest some might operate more on external cues, constructed identities, maybe social camouflage, or even manipulation. Raises fundamental questions about consciousness, genuine self-awareness.
Yeah, it really does. And then it circles back to the influence of cultural conditions, this need to keep up with trends, extremist behavior influencing youth, lack of responsibility, even reactive abuse, all seen by the source as potential indicators of these deeper imbalances.
These are all undeniably powerful societal factors. They can contribute to psychological distress and could certainly reflect or worsen internal imbalances. The source seems to be painting a picture of a complex interplay between our inner landscape and all these external forces acting on us.
So given all this focus on imbalance, the crucial question is, how do things shift? How do we find balance? The source touches on this, notably highlighting kinesiology.
Yes, the alternative medicine angle.
Right. It suggests kinesiology might help shift imbalances in the psyche as they manifest in the body and influence our core beliefs.
The source mentions kinesiology, which, from that alternative view, sees the body holding energetic patterns linked to our mental and emotional states. The idea is that physical interventions might help release those patterns, shift underlying beliefs.
It really underscores that mind-body connection again.
It does. Addressing physical manifestations of psychic distress could potentially facilitate shifts in belief systems, contributing to overall well-being.
The text also emphasizes being grounded, a term we hear a lot.
Common in wellness circles.
And it makes a really key point. Our relationship with ourselves sets the tone for relationships with others, suggesting we should strive to love what is balanced love.
That's a deeply resonant idea. Inner harmony as the bedrock for healthy external relationships, that's a cornerstone in many traditions. Loving what is balanced love suggests seeking and nurturing connections that reflect mutual well-being, equilibrium, not imbalance or dependency.
And it kind of concludes this section with the implied quote of how individuals actually do balance themselves, suggesting that what we seek help for are clues to the underlying imbalances.
Exactly. Like our presenting problems are the surface indicators
of deeper internal shifts needed.
Precisely. The concerns that bring us to seek support or change are often outward signs of deeper, unresolved imbalances. Understanding those concerns gives valuable insight into the journey towards self-mastery and inner equilibrium.
The source wraps up by reiterating this interconnectedness of spirit and psyche, the mind-body-soul connection, as essential for achieving that internal balance. And it brings us back to that core idea. Regardless of sex or gender, every human has both masculine and feminine principles within their mental and spiritual reasoning. And importantly, has the capacity to understand and work with them.
That's a really crucial takeaway. The source stresses the universality of these energies within all of us, transcending external classifications. Achieving balance involves recognizing, understanding, and intentionally integrating both aspects to foster greater mental and spiritual harmony.
So to break it all together, this deep dive into self-mastery and metaphysical enrichment of the psyche has led us through a fascinating and, sometimes intense exploration of our inner world.
Definitely.
The source lays out this war on the psyche, influenced by society, leading to imbalance between its sacred masculine and feminine principles. This imbalance, it argues, has far-reaching consequences, psychological, physical, relational, contributing to everything from polarized behaviors and lost identity to artificial personas.
Yeah, it covers a lot of ground.
It touches on discerning others, delves into controversial ideas like aesthetic warfare, but ultimately, it points towards pathways to balance through conscious recognition and integration of these inner principles, even suggesting practices like kinesiology might help facilitate shifts.
Indeed. The source ultimately encourages a deeper, more nuanced understanding of our own internal dynamics and the powerful external forces shaping them. It posits that true self-mastery comes from this ongoing process of recognizing and harmonizing these inner masculine and feminine energies, leading to more fulfilling relationships, stronger self-sense, a more grounded way of being.
So here's a final thought. Considering this war on the psyche and this fundamental concept of internal masculine-feminine balance, how might actively, consciously cultivating both aspects within ourselves serve as a form of personal, maybe even societal resilience against those constant outside pressures?
That's interesting.
It really makes you think about the subtle but maybe profound ways these internal shifts could ripple outwards, affecting our interactions, our broader world. Something to mull over.
Definitely something to reflect on.
Thanks for taking that deep dive with me.
My pleasure.
Until our next exploration.